Hi.
Hi.
Hi, I'm sorry for coming a little bit late. I had some problems with the internet, but I think it's okay now.
No problem. I've had some problems with my microphone.
No, I can't hear you now. I could hear you previously.
Can you hear me now? Yeah?
I can hear you.
Okay, one moment. Let me just fiddle and see if I can get these to work. Because there's a bit of background noise and it will be easier for us both, I think. But if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's not the end of the world. What you're doing sounds quite interesting. I had a little look at the website. I didn't read lots and lots and lots. But tell me a bit about it.
Yeah, it's like my idea is kind of developing every day. But it would be interesting to like make a platform where people could feel more togetherness. I wanted to share stories for compassion, where people tell a personal story from their life. And then I've been thinking a little bit about philosophy lately and how a lot of the way that we're doing things in the West and also internationally, it's based on like a few main ideas from way back. For example, way back to Aristotle, he defined a lot of how like we're doing scientific stuff. And then you have Descartes and Locke, John Locke, which are like which had some pretty nice and novel ideas, but still they were just ideas and thoughts. And I kind of find it a little bit weird that we put so much emphasis on these philosophers that are just like normal people who are just thinking and writing down their thoughts. So I was thinking it's interesting to maybe have like an holistic approach on how people think and philosophize a little bit around that and see if there's different ways of thinking about this world and in a way that we can maybe live a little bit more in tune with nature and also be a little bit more compassionate to ourselves and to other people and beings. So I got quite eager when Emily said you did some sustainability education or something like that. Because I'm a bit curious about how that works and where those ideas comes from and stuff like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you were saying just then about the kind of lionization, I guess, of like individuals, like individual philosophers, like Aristotle or whoever.
Mm.
Do you think that that philosophy, as in the lionization of individuals or putting individual thinkers or theorists or whoever on a parapet and kind of worshipping them.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's endemic across multiple disciplines? Or do you think that's something that only happens in philosophy?
So I just have to think
Do you
about
understand what I mean?
this. So you said something about linear or something like that?
Lionize, so it's like almost like hero worship, like
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
like focusing on one particular person's ideas and kind of holding them up to be kind of more than maybe what they are almost.
Yeah. Okay. And then endemic means like specific to that field.
Yeah, no, so endemic would be something that happens everywhere.
Okay.
So it would be, say, for example, if I use the examples I'm most familiar with of like geography or science, kind of from a kind of 12 to 18-year-old UK student, like you would learn about X or Y person, or history, you would learn about X or Y king, or rather than learning about the kind of bigger picture. And I think, I don't know, I agree with what you're saying, and I think perhaps that's, I think there's a lot of interesting questions about why we do that, and I think that those questions could be asked about a lot of different people and a lot of different disciplines, and it's just that's an open-ended question, really. But
yeah. No, but I think it's true. I think a few people have defined like big broad schools of thoughts, and then we've been like building on top of it. Like you have Newton for physics, and then you have Locke for economy. Aristotle defined a lot about natural sciences and also ideas in Christianity, I think. So I think, yeah, of course it's simplified in a way, but I also think it's been straining a lot of ideas and visions that we could have had, and not idealizing certain people. Yeah. For example, I've had some interviews with a couple of friends from Zambia and another girl from Malawi, and I studied with some friends from Zambia in university, and she said like, why do we never learn about African philosophers? It's international student studies, but we're just learning about like these Western classical theories, and we didn't really integrate even Eastern philosophy, which is quite relevant to, should say, holistic environmentalism and stuff like that. And then I started Googling a little bit, and I read that, for example, Descartes, he was quite racist. So I think also way back then you would have those big thinkers that would kind of maybe they were not the main reason why people were racist, but they would still like justifying a little bit being racist.
Yes, yeah. I think it's institutional. Without going into one specific topic, it's institutional, isn't it?
Yeah.
And lots of things are, lots of attitudes to lots of different things. What do you think about race or gender or the environment or anything? Not anything, but yeah, lots of different things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you want to? How do you normally do it? Do you normally ask questions, or what's best for you?
For me, it's very different in each interview. So I just usually or sometimes we just talk, and sometimes I ask questions. So, but maybe I can just ask some broad questions. For example, what interests you? What's close to your heart?
I think that some of the things that you've mentioned already are really important to me, and I think that's probably a bit of a coincidence. So I think kind of trying to think in a big picture, holistic way about positive changes that has like I guess I'm quite motivated by outcomes, by impact. So by something that I can do that is like, this is what it was like now, and this is what it's like after. And a lot of that in my kind of professional life has been around educating young people, because I think that I was very fortunate to be raised by parents who were very environmentally conscious and knowledgeable, I guess, and brought me up in a way that I guess might not have been typical compared to most of my peers. And so I feel like I want to give people opportunities that I was able to enjoy, to make their own individual kind of connection with the natural world and build up their own sense of kind of self-worth, and kind of, as well as that kind of environmental thing, trying to plant that little seed in children and young people to get them curious, to get them to think about things that are outside their comfort zone, and to maybe embrace those new feelings and new sensations and new places that I take them to, or that I meet them in, and to embrace the positives in that, and the kind of because I think that if people do have that kind of outward-looking mindset, then it's more likely there are going to be more positive connections between people and communities, and more, I guess, boundaries that currently exist be kind of like personally and collectively broken down. So I guess there's a bit of that as well. So yeah, it's quite big picture stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
Being informed to make decisions which have a positive impact on themselves and their communities and the planet. So I guess that's a very big picture idea of what kind of motivates me. But I guess without sounding so serious, I've also been motivated a lot of my life by exploring and adrenaline, and because I've never worked in a school, and so if you work in a school, you might work with 10, or maybe in a big school like 100, 150 teachers. But I don't mean this as a badge of honor, but I've probably worked with thousands and thousands of teachers, and I've seen every different type of teacher you could possibly imagine. And I'm not an expert, like I'm sure there's, but like it's interesting how you kind of notice the behaviors and the different ways they have of dealing with things. And there's definitely a lot of similarities and a lot of themes, I guess. And one of them, like you just said, is like certain personality types you often.
Are you
control is a big one.
Control
is a big one. Like often teachers, I think, really like to be in control.
Yeah, I can understand that, but I guess there's positive things to that too, because for me, I'm like, I don't think I would fit as a teacher really, because maybe I'm too undefined in a way, and I think it's hard to stand and convey a message when you can't really define it and be conclusive about it. But so I think like wanting to control the situation is also good because it sets certain structure for other people. Yeah, it's nice to have those structures sometimes, sense of security.
Yeah, that's what a lot of formal education is about. There will be a 3-hour exam at this time on this date, and we have 2 years of lessons to get you to that point, and to do that we need to do this. So yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of structure and a lot of control, and on every kind of level of the hierarchy, certainly in the UK, and that's good and it's bad. Yeah, like you said.
Yeah, because every negative side has a positive side.
Yeah.
When it comes to everything, even when it comes to feelings, like feeling sad, it's a good thing because it shows that something is lacking from life, or it shows that you're tired maybe and need to go to bed. So it like shows the needs and of people in a way. Have you watched Star Wars?
Yes.
Yeah. I was thinking when you said like that you could recognize a teacher, I was thinking about these new Star Wars movies with the woman that works in the water hole or the bar or something.
Oh, with the glass.
Yeah. And she was like looking into the eyes of the main character and saying like, oh, when you see so many eyes, kind of recognize them.
Yeah. I like to be proved wrong though, so you know, if often I'm wrong, and that's fine. But like, it is quite interesting.
Yeah. Um,
Whereas there's lots of different teachers and people teach in lots of different ways.
yeah.
So I'm maybe being a bit narrow in my view. I'm not gonna...
It's interesting though. But yeah, it like with posture and everything, you can't really have a posture that is hiding away if you're a teacher. You kind of have to show people that you're here and you're in control. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Interesting as well. I do like teachers. I get on with teachers quite well. I think most of them are quite um, often they have really, I guess, like their core values are really kind of, not that I'm really judgmental, but their core values are often really positive, and they want to have a kind of positive impact on their pupils and the people that they work with, and they often set out with kind of quite big philosophical ideas about making a difference. And I think lots of teachers do amazing work. So don't get me wrong that I'm criticizing them, because I'm not.
No, no.
I think it's probably one of the hardest jobs you can do, actually.
Yeah,
I think.
I agree. It's very like I'm trying to think in English, but I respect it a lot. Like people wants to be teachers. It must be demanding.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
So what kind of teaching do you do?
So I am working on a government project. So a project that's funded by the government, the Department of Education and the Department for Farming and Rural Affairs, which is like I guess the closest thing in the UK to the environmental arm of the government. And the project is based around training teachers to deliver their own outdoor learning. A lot of it's focused around kind of environmental and sustainability outcomes, and then a lot of it's based around mental health and well-being. So the idea is that they're kind of fused. They actually don't need to know about environmental things like to identify trees or bugs or whatever. They can teach whatever they're comfortable with outdoors, and it's about making those small adjustments to take maybe literacy, like writing a poem or doing some basic arithmetic or whatever it is outdoors. So yeah, we went for that model because we wanted teachers and schools to be able to tailor what they're doing for their both their individual skill set, but also their school community, rather than saying this is what everyone's going to do, and the kind of 375 schools that we're working with, you're all doing exactly the same thing.
And I thought it was very interesting that like the teacher, they don't really need to know biology when teaching in nature. And I think that's also like quite a limiting idea from like Western science, is that we're putting name on everything, categorizing everything, and in that way we kind of distance ourselves from it a little bit, because it's more important that this tree is called birch than to actually be close to the tree and just experience being in that environment. So for me, I've been feeling like challenged by nature a little bit because I didn't know anything about it, instead of like just going out and enjoy it and just being there. I think that's nice.
Yeah, I think so. To give you a bit of background, we found that out by asking teachers what the main barriers were to them delivering learning outside. And they said health and safety, they said knowledge, and they said experience. So the knowledge thing, I agree. I think a lot of our outcomes related to a lot of teaching we do both from a 4-year-old through to a postgrad are based on like the kind of knowledge culture of imitation and repetition, rather than, yeah, like you said, kind of more qualitative maybe outcomes. And that's partly to do with assessment. I mean, you probably know this already, but it's partly to do with assessment and the way in which students are assessed, but it's partly to do with culture, isn't it? And Linnaeus and all the kind of history that we've had of collecting and categorizing. But I also think there's probably something genetic in there, and I've got zero evidence for this, but there's something that humans.
So where does these ambitions come from? The school or the kids coming closer to nature and the...
One of the interesting areas of academia, which kind of blends, I guess, sociology and a kind of environmental ethics, is nature connectedness. And there's something called the NCI, or the Nature Connectedness Index, which has been developed by some academics, mostly at the University of Derby, and they basically are able to use a metric to work out how connected we are, both individually and collectively, to nature. And they've created a baseline level that the UK needs to reach if it will be, I guess, sustainable moving forward into future generations. And so it's all like on a simple XY graph, and it's kind of, we need to be here and we're here. And so it's a very basic way of looking at it, but there's a lot of data that goes into it. And one of the very interesting outcomes is that nature connectedness is very high in young people, especially between the ages of 5 and 10. And then when young people reach the age of 11 or 12, it drops off a cliff. And it keeps going down until around about kind of 16, 17, 18. And then it plateaus. And then over time, depending on the individual, but this is kind of collective data, it then kind of goes up again. And depending upon the individual and various other factors, it then can keep rising and then plateau off in mid-30s, or it can then go up and up. But there's lots of variables, but the fundamental point is that it drops during the teenage years. And so there's been lots of small-scale academic studies trying to work out why that is. Because for the obvious reason that if we can understand more about it, maybe we can reduce the decline, or at least be able to improve it again after the decline, if we have to accept that decline happens. So that nature connectedness and that kind of metric is quite brutal, I guess, because it's a number. And for many people, that's not something that they associate with their, I guess, environmental morals or ethics or principles. And I guess some people would find it quite crude. But I think it's quite interesting to look at kind of in a big data sense. And so the project I'm working on is the first project to kind of look at it from a big data set. Aspiration to impact education policy, to say that if we do this, then this is the impact on the nature connectedness of children and young people, and these are the positive impacts associated to their mental health and well-being, and this is the positive impact that's had upon their or lack of negative impact upon their curriculum-based outcomes, and then this is, so you should change the policy to include this, 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 and this. So that's kind of the big picture of the kind of aspirational outcome of what I'm doing, the project kind of generally, and that's kind of where nature connectedness fits in. But if you look up a guy, if you're interested in it, if you look up a guy called Miles Richardson, I'll type. If you look at his blog, it's really interesting. And there's lots of good ideas, and he thinks about things in a very interesting way, and has a lot, I think, of interesting things to say as well.
Perfect. Yeah, I love it, and I love the idea that the idea actually is like implemented into government institutions as well. That the government is seeing that there is a need for it. It's really nice.
Yeah, it surprised me. That's when I first came across it.
Yeah. Because it's not many years back, and you would still have like government officials that are very like climate change skeptical in Norway as well.
Okay.
But yeah, but now lately, like maybe the couple of like, past 2 years, it's like it's become a truth in a way. It's a fact, and even for the US being very skeptical, it seems like it hits people there as well. I went to the US before Christmas, and then at one party, some 40 years old women came over to me, and they apologized because they've been using the resources on Earth. And I was like, it's not your fault, like it's everyone's fault. So that was very interesting because they looked at me like as a younger generation, which they felt like they had to apologize to. It's very interesting.
That's interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about the motivations for that, isn't it, and whether that's driven by guilt or by something else.
Yeah. What else are you thinking it could be?
I don't know, really. I suppose there's like a shared connection, isn't there, that people look for, and I suppose there's lots of different ways of framing it, but certainly in kind of like the global north, we have that kind of connection that we're I guess we have to acknowledge the fact that we're all living in a I guess a situation that is unsustainable.
Yeah.
In the short term, in the medium term, and I certainly have been along a journey through my adult years of like guilt and denial, and I think I'm probably more accepting of some of the facts now than I ever have been, but still feel, I guess, a sense of helplessness, my ability to kind of have a true impact on and come to terms with that fact, I suppose, and the fact that I've benefited so much from all the associated things of using the resources and having like a high quality education, healthcare and housing and food and etc.
Yeah.
It's a bit, without opening up a whole Pandora's box, it's a bit of the same with capitalism. But yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting. I don't think that really answers your question, but
no, but I think it's hard to answer that question.
Yes, it is. Did you enjoy? Where did you go in the US?
Mostly in California, but also a quick trip to Louisiana and Colorado.
Okay.
So,
cool. I've only been to the airport. I'd like to go one day. I'd like to cycle across it or something crazy like that.
Oh wow, that would be cool.
Well, I think a lot of it'd be quite boring. I think it might be better. cycle
Yeah.
down the west coast or up the west coast. I think that might be more interesting.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I hitchhiked through California through the coastal highways, and it's beautiful there. I would love to go back. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Maybe.
But you've been to Latin America? I would really love to go there. I haven't been.
Yeah, it's really. I found certainly Colombia to be one of the more like. It's got a lot of distinct culture. Like a lot. Don't get me wrong. Like every South American country has its own distinct culture, but I felt like Colombia was one of the kind of clearest, and that made it kind of one of the most interesting as well.
Flairist?
Clearest, like you kind of there were lots of experiences or things or foods or people or that you would only find in Colombia, if that makes sense.
Mm.
So yeah, it was definitely memorable. So I did a cycling trip. So I cycled through Patagonia.
Wow.
And then left my bike in Santiago on a roof, on a guy who I met's roof. And then went up the west coast with my backpack and then came back to Santiago and came home with my bike. And my bike's outside in the shed now.
Oh, really? So
Same bike.
you brought it from England?
Yeah.
Really?
Which is crazy, I know. But I didn't want to, I already had a bike, so I was like, I don't want to buy another bike.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and it's arrived and everything. That's so incredible.
It's a bit mad, but you know.
Yeah. So you and your bike, you have your own story. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Very slightly indulgent, but very fun story.
Sorry, what does indulgent mean?
It means like almost like being too good to yourself.
Ah.
Like if you eat too much chocolate, or you know, like self-indulgence would be treating yourself a lot.
Ah. So why did you find it indulgent? Did you like?
Just because I think like again, it's that privileged thing of being having the choice to be and the money and the time to be able to do something like that. And kind of 0.0001% of people on the planet who can, and just being aware of that. And I suppose therefore an element of it has to be motivated by the fact that the selfish fact that I really want to do it for me, and I think it's important to be comfortable with that and to be aware of it, rather than to ignore it or park it.
True. But I've been thinking about like self-compassion a lot, and I think it makes a lot of sense to follow your own heart and do whatever makes you feel good, because otherwise you kind of leave that responsibility for other people, right? So it's very nice to take.
You're right, I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to be conscious of the fact that not many people have the choice to be able to take that path to make them happy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of power, I guess, to be able to make those choices. And I'm very privileged.
Yeah. I guess that's a form of gratitude as well. Like,
sorry, repeat that, please.
It sounds like a form of gratitude as well. Like,
yeah, it can be. Yeah, it's not necessarily a stick to beat myself with, but it can it can be and has been as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely both.
I think those are very interesting. I've throughout a lot of my life, I've not been motivated by my own happiness. In a way, I've like felt guilty about stuff, and kind of trying to work towards something to make the world a better place to live for other people. And then I kind of forgot myself a little bit on the road. And after a while, I just figured that it doesn't really work if I'm not on my own team. So I guess that's why I'm a little bit like thinking about these thoughts on a detailed level.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I would say that I had a kind of similar journey, in the respect that sometimes positive actions, actions that someone else might look on as being positive, are motivated by not self-compassion, like you said, but by guilt or by obligation. And I went on that journey through veganism, having been vegan from when I was like 18, and I stopped being vegan when I was 30. No, 30, whatever, 30, it doesn't matter. Because I realized that the main thing that was keeping me going was guilt, not making a positive difference, and not compassion, and not all those other things. And it was actually making me very unhappy. And so, yeah. Like you said, if you're thinking about other people or other things or animals or whatever it is, and forgetting kind of those core values of self-compassion, and I guess sustainable values, because guilt's not a sustainable value to hold, to keep a sustainable emotion necessarily, in the long term.
How come?
Well, for me personally, I think that I can't speak for others, but I think that guilt can be a motivator in the short and medium and long term. But I think guilt signifies that you're holding on to something, and I'm characterizing holding on to something as being bad. It's not necessarily bad. It can be good as well. But I think the combination of holding on to something that you feel guilty about over kind of medium and longer term, for me, has had negative impacts. And I would only extrapolate and say that therefore I would imagine it does for other people, but I don't know any of the kind of philosophy or kind of evidence behind that. And so, yeah, I guess that I personally felt that kind of like a burden almost. And yeah.
These kind of conversations, thinking about guilt, like why you're actually doing this. Are you like, why should we sacrifice ourselves when we can do things that we really want to, and they can still be good for other people and ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from discussions with some of my friends over the past few years, I think the thing that really hit home for me is that thing of being conscious of it. And maybe that's as simple as paying lip service, like talking about it.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's about changing something or your actions. But I think it's important, and there's always a responsibility to make, I guess, like informed. And don't get me wrong, because I'm not perfect and I say things all the time, which are probably uninformed. But like, yeah, I think it's important to make statements and be informed about X, Y, Z, And so, yeah, I think saying like, I had a great time when I did this, like going to Colombia. I think it's important to also acknowledge that other bit, which is that kind of privilege, which maybe on a very vain level helps me deal with the fact that I feel guilty on some level about my privilege. It's not luck, it's privilege.
Yeah, it is privilege, but it's also like a choice to make. And even though you are privileged, you could have not made that choice. So it's also personal.
Yeah. I agree. I could have bought a car. What other people do with their money, yeah.
But like we can think so much, right? And how many of our thoughts are really useful for us, and what is right and what is wrong, and what gets us to like this point and that point. Sometimes it's a lot of gibberish in a way. So sometimes it's just nice to let go of the thoughts. And
is it good to keep thinking about stuff, or is it good to just stop thinking and then let it do its thing? It's kind of over analysis almost, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess lots of people fight or don't fight, get on with that element of their personality, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I guess I can't really say that as well. Like I appreciate not thinking and being in the moments and appreciating the moments, because that's what we're living for. And I find myself actually being more productive, thinking less in a way. But at the same time, I've been unemployed for a year, and it made me go nuts. And now I just got into a PhD position in fire preparedness. And I can see that I'm kind of quite addicted to putting my mind into like solving puzzles as well.
Would you use the word distraction, or is that not right?
I think I used them as a distraction before, when I wasn't aware of it, that it was a distraction. But now I feel like I have I still have to work on this a lot, I think, but now I feel like I have an outlook to my job where I try to find myself in balance every time I sit down and study, where I am happy. Like, for example, this morning I went out running before work, and then when I found myself becoming less motivated, instead of forcing myself to read, I just did some yoga, and then I could sit down again and I could keep on. But before, I would like distract myself from running. I would distract myself from doing yoga, because I wouldn't consider those as important, because I was kind of self-sacrificing myself a little bit and didn't want to think and stuff like that. So instead of saying to myself, oh, do some yoga if you don't feel like 100% into this, I would just say, oh, you suck, Anna, why don't you just like put on your grown-up pants and just sit here and do your work, kind of. So being more positive and finding space, find joy, and do the puzzle solving that I like. Doesn't need to be like one purpose in life, it can be several ones.
Yeah, and it's about creating the conditions that make you, I guess, able to do what you want to do, or produce what you want to produce, or read what you need to read, whatever it is. And everybody has different ways of doing that, and everyone has an opinion on it. And there's a million and one different ways to like eat an apple or whatever it is. And it's like you said, it's about finding what works, and also acknowledging that what works can change.
Yeah.